They say that grief is the price we pay for love. I paid the price, and then some. For 2 agonizing years, I lived under a shadow so deep it felt like a permanent eclipse. I was Eleanor, the grieving widow of David, a man who was everything to me, my first love, the father of my 2 young boys, and as I later found out, the architect of a spectacular, unforgivable lie. David was a charming whirlwind. He had that infectious, boundless energy that made everyone around him feel like anything was possible. He was a visionary, or so he claimed. He was in the construction development business, always chasing the next big deal, the next multi-million-dollar project. I was his anchor, the stable, sensible kindergarten teacher who balanced his soaring ambition. For the first 5 years of our marriage, the excitement was real. We lived well, in a large, beautiful home that always felt a little too big for us, constantly filled with David's blueprints and enthusiastic promises of future wealth. The trouble started subtly, disguised as opportunity. David's projects grew larger, and the stress grew palpable. He stopped being the carefree man who would spend hours building Lego towers with our sons. He was constantly on the phone, his voice low and tense, often pacing late into the night. "Everything okay, honey?" I would ask, wrapping my arms around him. He would always give the same practiced smile. "Just the usual, Elle, cash flow issues. It's a high-risk game, but the payoff is massive. Just trust me. We're almost there." I trusted him. That was my core failing. I trusted him even when the collection calls started coming in. At first, they were polite. Then they became aggressive, the voices on the other end hardening with legal threats. David would intercept every call, yelling into the phone in a mixture of anger and panic, always promising payment next week as soon as the funding comes through. He started traveling incessantly, securing investor capital, he called it, but he always looked more haggard upon his return, not less. His ambition hadn't just brought stress, it had brought a crushing weight of debt that he consistently minimized. One night, I finally pressed him on the numbers I'd seen a letter from the bank, a final notice before foreclosure on the house. The figure wasn't just large, it was astronomical. "David, this is millions," I whispered, my voice trembling as I held the legal document. "What have you done? We can't pay this. We'll lose everything." He sat me down, his eyes pleading, yet still holding that spark of the eternal optimist. "It's a temporary liquidity problem, Elle. I took risks, big risks. I leveraged the company and the house for a final, crucial investment in a resort development down in the Cayman Islands. If it hits, we're set for life. If it fails, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." But the bridge was already burning. The resort deal collapsed spectacularly. The investors pulled out. The bank was coming for the collateral. And worse, David's desperation had led him to associate with the kind of people who don't take failure as an answer, the kind of people who don't use courtrooms to settle their debts. The threats escalated from aggressive calls to silent. Black cars idling at the end of our street. David became terrified. He began sleeping with a baseball bat by the bed and checking the locks compulsively. He was no longer the charming risk-taker. He was a desperate man trapped in a hole he had dug for himself. "Elle," he confided one evening, his voice barely a breath. "It's not just the banks now, it's the lenders. They're serious. They won't just take the house. They'll come for me. They'll come for all of us." His fear was contagious, seeping into the very foundations of our home. I pleaded with him to go to the police, to declare bankruptcy, to do anything legal. Bankruptcy won't stop them, Elle. He insisted, his eyes wide. These people don't care about legal proceedings. They care about their money. I have to disappear, just for a while until I can figure out a way to make enough to pay them off. The idea was terrifying, but less terrifying than the constant fear of violence. I begged him to let us disappear together, but he refused. The kids need stability. You need stability. If I disappear, they'll assume I'm gone for good. They'll stop looking for me here. It's the only way to keep you safe. And then the shocking event occurred. It was a cold, rainy November morning. David was supposed to be flying to a meeting in Chicago. I kissed him goodbye at 5 a.m. He looked unusually solemn, holding me tighter than usual. I love you, Elle. Always remember that. At 10 a.m., the police showed up at my door. They were grim-faced and professional. They informed me that David's car had been found abandoned near the cliffs overlooking the bay, roughly an hour from the airport. Inside the car, they found his wallet, his phone, and a hastily scribbled note addressed to me. Forgive me, Elle. I couldn't handle the pressure. Love you all. They searched the cliffs and the turbulent waters below for 3 days. They never found a body. But based on the note, the sheer drop, and the financial stress he was known to be under, the police concluded the obvious. David had taken his own life. They issued a presumed death certificate a week later. I was instantly transformed into the grieving widow. The local news ran sympathetic pieces. The community rallied around me and the boys. The debt collectors, believing their target was dead, backed off, though the banks were still ruthless in seizing the house. David's death had saved me and the children from the immediate physical danger, but it had thrust me into the emotional hell of widowhood and financial ruin. I spent 2 years picking up the pieces, selling the giant house, moving into a tiny apartment, and trying to explain to my sons why their energetic, ambitious father was never coming home. I wore black. I cried silent tears every night. I grieved the loss of my husband and the loss of our life. I genuinely believed he was gone, a victim of his own unchecked ambition and desperation. Then, one mundane Thursday evening, as I was collapsed on the sofa, scrolling through channels after a long day of teaching, it happened. A commercial break started. It was an advertisement for a national chain of fitness centers. The scene was a brightly lit, pristine gym. And there he was, not a double, not a look-alike, but David, my dead husband. He was tanned, muscular, laughing easily, demonstrating a perfect bicep curl. He looked healthy, happy, and very much alive. His face, his distinctive scar above his left eyebrow, it was undeniably him. My presumed dead husband, the man whose funeral I had planned, was selling gym memberships on national television. The grief, the mourning, the 2 years of emotional sacrifice, it was all a lie. He didn't just abandon us. He had faked his own death to start anew, debt-free and apparently very fit life. The sight of David on the television screen was a physical shock. I didn't scream or cry. I simply froze. The remote control slipped from my numb fingers and hit the floor, its batteries scattering. Time compressed into a single terrifying instant, the bright, smiling face of my dead husband, filling the screen, demonstrating proper weightlifting form. He wasn't just in the commercial, he was the featured success story. The caption at the bottom of the screen read, "Mike D, new life, new goals." Mike D. David. The tan was new, The short, stylish haircut was definitely different from the shaggy look he preferred, but the eyes, the distinct, slightly asymmetrical set of his green eyes, were his. The small, crescent-shaped scar above his left eyebrow, sustained during a childhood bike accident, was unmistakable. He was wearing an expensive, tailored compression shirt, a world away from the threadbare t-shirts and anxious suits he wore in the last months of his life. He looked carefree, energized, and utterly content. The commercial lasted exactly 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When the screen cut back to the local news anchor, I was still staring at the blank spot where his face had been. The profound relief that he was alive lasted only a fraction of a second, immediately replaced by a blinding, white-hot rage. 2 years. 2 years of wearing black. 2 years of my sons asking why Daddy never called. 2 years of fighting foreclosure and dealing with the crushing stigma of debt and suicide. All of it was a meticulously orchestrated performance designed to save one man's skin and financial well-being. He hadn't just abandoned us. He had forced us to publicly mourn a ghost while he rebuilt his life under a new name, now apparently Mike D. My immediate instinct was to call the police, to call the gym, to call the news station, to expose the lie immediately. But a cold, calculating voice of self-preservation stopped me. What would I say? My dead husband is alive and doing bicep curls? They would look at the death certificate, the suicide note, and assume grief had finally driven me over the edge. And more importantly, I had to consider the debt David had faked his death to escape millions in liabilities, some of which were owed to truly dangerous people. If I publicly exposed him, not only would he be arrested for fraud, but those dangerous lenders would realize he was alive. They would come looking for the money, and they would track him, and potentially me and the boys down. I couldn't risk putting my children back in danger just to satisfy my righteous fury. I needed proof that was irrefutable, and I needed a plan that was quiet, precise, and financially rewarding. I wanted revenge, but I needed justice more. A justice that secured my children's future with the money he had successfully shielded from his creditors. The first step was finding the commercial again. I searched online for the fitness chain, found the ad, and watched it repeatedly. Scrutinizing every frame, I paused the video on his face, feeling a perverse kind of relief that he hadn't changed his scar. He was living in Florida. According to the gym's local focus, Mike D was smiling, giving a cheesy testimonial about how the gym had helped him find a new sense of purpose. I needed his full location. I needed the name Mike D's new identity. I used my meager savings to hire a private investigator, PI. I didn't tell the PI the full, insane truth. I just told him I believed I had seen my estranged, missing ex-husband, who had a history of financial trouble, in a specific commercial, and that I needed confirmation of his location and new identity for a private legal matter. I stressed the importance of absolute discretion. I provided the PI with the video, high-resolution photos of David, and a list of his unique physical markers, particularly the scar. The PI was thorough. Within 2 weeks, I received the report. It was devastatingly simple. Mike Dawson, age 42, residing in a high-end gated community in Naples, Florida occupation, regional sales manager for the fitness chain. The PI included a photograph, Mike Dawson standing next to a gleaming new luxury sedan, a picture of affluent, debt-free success. He hadn't just faked his death, he had gotten a promotion. The report also contained a chilling detail. Mike Dawson was engaged. His fiancée was a beautiful young woman named Chelsea, a social media influencer and fitness enthusiast. The report included a screenshot of their joint engagement announcement on Instagram. "So excited for forever with my Mike. Our new life starts now." I stared at the picture of David, or Mike, smiling at his new, unsuspecting fiancée. He hadn't just replaced his life, he had replaced me with a younger, flashier model, one who knew nothing of the financial ruin and the desperate, cowardly act that had paved the way for her luxury engagement ring. The rage intensified, but it was now controlled, refined into a surgical instrument of vengeance. My plan began to crystallize. I wouldn't go to the police yet. I wouldn't call the debt collectors. I would go to Florida. I would infiltrate his new life, gather irrefutable evidence of his identity theft and fraud, and then, only then, would I expose him to his new fiancée, his employers, and the legal system, ensuring I was the only one who benefited from the chaos he had saved his money. I was going to take it all. I told my sister I needed a long vacation, a necessary break from teaching. I withdrew the last of my savings, enough for a discreet flight and a week in a motel in Naples. The boys were safe with my parents. I was no longer the grieving widow. I was a hunter, traveling across the country to confront a ghost. As the plane descended over the sparkling Florida coast, I pulled up the PI report one last time I read the name of the gated community, the sanctuary at Pelican Preserve. The irony was palpable. He had found his sanctuary, but soon I would be his reckoning. Naples, Florida was a blindingly sunny contradiction to the gray despair of my life in the 2 years since David's death. Every street looked manicured. Every person looked relaxed and wealthy. It was the perfect stage for a man who had successfully wiped his slate clean and invented a new, luxurious persona. I checked into a budget motel far from the coast, a strategic choice to ensure David, or Mike, would never stumble across me. My first priority was confirming his identity without revealing my own. My PI had provided the address for the sanctuary at Pelican Preserve, a community so exclusive it had a guard at the gate. I drove my rental car, a practical anonymous sedan, to the entrance. The guard, a young man with a headset, smiled politely. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I had rehearsed my cover story perfectly. "Yes, I'm Eleanor Vance. I have an appointment with Chelsea Hughes. I'm a representative from Wellness Magazine regarding her upcoming feature on fitness influencers. I believe she's expecting me." The lie was seamless. Chelsea was Mike's fiancée, the social media influencer. It was highly likely she had meetings like this regularly. The guard checked his clipboard. "Ah, Ms. Vance, yes, go straight down the main boulevard. It's the third house on the left after the water feature." I drove past the perfectly trimmed hedges and glistening water features, my heart pounding a rapid, nervous rhythm. The homes were massive architectural statements of wealth. The third house was an Italianate villa, complete with a terracotta roof and a 3-car garage. A gleaming black SUV was parked in the driveway. This was it. This was David's new life. I parked across the street and sat there. Watching the house, I didn't see David. I only saw Chelsea emerging from the front door in sleek yoga gear, talking animatedly on her phone as she clipped a leash onto a small, fluffy designer dog. She was exactly as I had seen in the PI's pictures, effortlessly beautiful, radiating the kind of shallow, sun-kissed perfection that had no room for the complexities of debt or death. I realized I couldn't just knock on the door. I needed access to his new routine, his new network, and most importantly, his new legal and financial documentation. The key to his identity was the fitness chain itself. The PI report stated David, now Mike Dawson, was the regional sales manager. He worked at the corporate office, but I figured he would occasionally visit the local flagship gym where his famous commercial was filmed. The next morning, I drove to the gym. It was enormous and intimidating, filled with impossibly fit people. I walked in, purchased a ridiculously expensive weekly pass, and signed up under my real name, Eleanor Vance. I needed to be visible, but in a way that he wouldn't expect. For 3 days, I worked out obsessively, positioning myself near the management offices, listening to conversations, and trying to gather intel. I quickly learned that Mike Dawson was something of a celebrity at the gym. Everyone knew him from the commercial. They talked about his inspirational turnaround, his incredible physique, and his upcoming wedding to Chelsea. "Mike's such a great guy," I overheard one trainer telling a client. "He's all about second chances. He told us he moved here a couple of years ago to get a fresh start after a rough patch." A fresh start. A rough patch. That's what he called faking his own death and abandoning his family. On the 4th day, as I was leaving the spin class, I saw him. He was standing by the juice bar dressed in a sharp blazer over a company polo shirt, holding a protein shake and laughing with the general manager. He looked directly at me, and for a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, our eyes locked. My body went cold, then hot. He hesitated for the briefest fraction of a second, a tiny muscle twitch at the corner of his jaw, before his practiced corporate smile returned, completely unclouded by recognition. He didn't recognize me. It was a strange, gut-wrenching realization. In the 2 years since his death, grief had aged me. Stress had carved new lines around my eyes, and my modest teacher's wardrobe made me blend into the background. I was a ghost of the woman he had left behind. To him, I was just another middle-aged woman at the gym, someone he had probably never truly seen, even when we were married. He turned back to the manager, oblivious. The insult was profound. Not only had he betrayed me, but I was so forgettable that the wife he had spent 10 years with was now unrecognizable just 5 feet away. The pain quickly hardened into resolve. His failure to recognize me was my greatest weapon. I realized the direct confrontation was too risky and unnecessary. I needed to access his workspace. The PI had mentioned Mike Dawson had a private office at the corporate building for the regional sales team. That night, back in my motel room, I devised a plan to infiltrate his office. I knew David. He was brilliant but sloppy about details, especially passwords. His old password for everything, our joint bank account, his laptop, even our home security system, was always the same. Chloe, 2015. Our son, Ethan, was born in 2013, but David had always had a strange favoritism for our daughter, Chloe, 2015. A small, weird obsession I never understood. The next day, I drove to the corporate park. The building was secure, but David's office was on the 2nd floor. My plan was simple. Pose as a delivery driver with a late package from his fiancée, Chelsea. I bought a cheap courier uniform at a thrift store and a large, empty box. I wore a baseball cap pulled low over my face. I walked straight into the lobby, ignoring the receptionist, and headed for the elevator. "Delivery for Mike Dawson on the second floor," I said gruffly to the receptionist, holding up the clipboard. "It's urgent. His fiancée wants it on his desk before 4 p.m. The receptionist, clearly overwhelmed, just waved me through. The elevator opened onto a quiet, sterile hallway of glass-walled offices. I found the one marked Regional Sales Manager, M. Dawson. The office was empty, but the door was locked with a standard digital keypad. I took a deep breath, fighting the adrenaline. I punched in the numbers. 24563622015, DAVID2015. A soft click echoed in the silent hallway. The door was open. Inside, the office was pristine, overlooking the palm trees and the Gulf. On his desk, his personal laptop was open, logged in. The wallpaper was a smiling picture of Mike and Chelsea. I sat down in his expensive leather chair, feeling a sickening familiarity. I was in the heart of his lie. Now it was time to uncover the truth and seize what was rightfully mine. I closed the office door softly, the click of the lock feeling like a definitive sealing of my fate. I was deep inside the enemy territory, sitting in the chair where David, now Mike Dawson, conducted his new, respectable, debt-free life. I had mere minutes before someone noticed the uncollected package or realized the door was ajar. My hands flew to the keyboard. David's sloppiness was my greatest ally. He had merely minimized the windows on his desktop, not closed them. I clicked on the browser, and the corporate email system sprang to life. I searched his sent and received emails, focusing on dates around the time of his staged death 2 years prior. I needed proof of his planning, not just his new life. The first crucial piece was an email sent to an offshore account manager 3 weeks before his suicide. The subject line was chillingly administrative, finalizing the transfer, code Phoenix. The body of the email detailed the sale of several high-value, untraceable assets, luxury watches, gold bullion he'd purchased through the construction company, and the transfer of the proceeds, nearly $3 million, to an encrypted Swiss bank account. The transfer was contingent on the immediate finalization of a legal dissolution. He hadn't died penniless. He had cashed out, ensuring he retained a substantial nest egg completely shielded from his creditors, and, critically, from me. His fake death wasn't just a desperate escape, it was a highly profitable transaction. The cold anger I felt was replaced by a calculated focus. I immediately forwarded this email and the attached transfer confirmations to my private email address. Next, I looked for his new identity documentation. I navigated to his personal cloud storage, which predictably was synced to his corporate desktop. I found a folder labeled Naples Docs. Inside, I struck gold. There were scanned copies of his fake identity papers, a new Social Security card, a Florida driver's license, and most shockingly, a completely forged birth certificate for Michael David Dawson, born in a small town in Arizona, a place David had visited once on a business trip years ago. The forgery was expert, a level of detail that indicated professional help, not just a desperate whim. The birth certificate cited his parents, who were very much alive, as deceased, giving him a clean slate. I quickly downloaded every single document onto a thumb drive I had brought. This was the proof I needed, conclusive evidence of federal identity fraud. But the most disturbing discovery wasn't about the money or the identity. It was about the note he left in the car, the one that broke my heart and convinced the police he was gone. I found a draft folder in his email labeled The Script. The first file was the suicide note itself, typed out meticulously. But below it was a long, chilling document detailing the whole plan David hadn't planned to just disappear. He had orchestrated a scene that guaranteed a swift declaration of death. He detailed how he staged the car, leaving his wallet and phone to signal finality. He wrote about the difficulty of leaving the note and how he had to ensure the police believed the grief narrative. The document contained a sentence that made me physically recoil. The note must be emotional, stressing my inability to handle the pressure, which Eleanor can confirm. She will grieve, but her relief that the collectors are gone will ensure she doesn't dig too deep. He had banked on my relief. He had bet my fear of the creditors would outweigh my suspicion of his death. As I was finishing the download, the outer office door opened. "Mike, are you in here?" It was the general manager, his voice cheerful. "We have a sales meeting in 5. That new trainee is looking for you." Panic spiked. I was still logged in, the screen blazing with Swiss account transfers and forged birth certificates. I minimized everything in a flash and scrambled to remove the thumb drive. I grabbed the package I had placed on the floor, stood up, and opened the office door just as the manager reached it. "Oh, thank goodness," I exclaimed, using my teacher voice, friendly, slightly flustered, and utterly harmless. "I'm so sorry, sir. I was looking for Mike Dawson's office. I'm Eleanor Vance with Wellness Magazine, and Chelsea insisted this package get to him immediately for the gala tonight." His door was ajar, and I thought I might just leave it on his desk. The manager looked at me, then at the box. "Oh, the engagement gala. Got it. No worries, Ms. Vance. Mike stepped out for a call, but I'll make sure he gets this right now." I handed him the empty box. "Thank you so much. Please tell him Chelsea says don't forget the cufflinks." I made the statement sound like an intimate, wifely detail, one that would make the manager assume I was merely an acquaintance of the fiancé. I spun around and practically ran down the hall, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I didn't breathe until I was back in the rental car, merging onto the busy highway. I had the proof. I had the fraudulent identity, the Swiss bank account details, and the sickening narrative of his staged suicide. Mike Dawson was a ghost who had stolen a massive fortune and abandoned his family to grief and debt. The next step was the confrontation. I couldn't simply hand this over to the police. I needed leverage to ensure I received the money he successfully hid. He was about to marry a woman who knew nothing of the debt, the death, or the 2 sons he left behind. His engagement party was tonight. My plan was no longer about quiet justice. It was about public, devastating exposure at the moment of his greatest triumph. I was going to crash the engagement gala and force him to choose. Go to jail for fraud and identity theft, or give me back the $3 million and disappear forever. The engagement gala was everything David's new life promised. Lavish, superficial, and entirely debt-free. It was held at a prestigious yacht club overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, a beacon of sparkling, affluent hypocrisy. I stood across the street, hidden in the shadows of a public parking lot, watching the guests arrive in their designer clothes. The air was thick with the scent of salt water and expensive perfume. I was no longer Eleanor Vance, the tired kindergarten teacher. I was a woman consumed by a precise, surgical rage, dressed in the most elegant black dress I could afford with my remaining funds, a silent echo of the 2 years I spent mourning his fake death. I clutched a small, sleek evening bag that contained only 2 things: my phone, loaded with the screenshots of the Swiss account transfer and the forged documents, and a small antique silver locket, a genuine relic of my actual marriage to David, containing a photo of our 2 boys. My PI had given me the final crucial detail. The time of the toast. David, Mike, and Chelsea were scheduled to give a joint toast at 8:30 p.m. That would be my moment. I needed an audience, and I needed him at his most vulnerable, during his moment of triumph. At 8:20 p.m. I crossed the street. The security at the yacht club was tight, but my black dress and confident stride, coupled with the name Vance that the PI had ensured was on the guest list, under the pretext of being a PR associate of Chelsea's, got me past the initial checkpoint. I walked into the ballroom. It was breathtakingly opulent. Filled with champagne flutes and the chatter of the wealthy elite, I immediately spotted David and Chelsea. They were standing under an archway of white roses, Chelsea radiating joy, wearing a diamond engagement ring that probably cost more than my annual salary. David, or Mike, looked every bit the successful regional manager, tanned and impeccably dressed in a white dinner jacket. He was laughing, his arm around his new fiancée. The easy, unburdened laugh he hadn't used with me for the last 3 years of our marriage. The sight of it felt like a punch to the gut. I moved along the perimeter of the room, positioning myself near the raised stage where the toast would take place. I needed to be close enough to be heard, but far enough away to ensure a swift exit if the situation turned violent. At 8:30 p.m., the DJ lowered the music, and a distinguished man, presumably Chelsea's father, tapped a microphone. "Friends, family, let's raise a glass to my incredible daughter Chelsea and her wonderful fiancé Mike Dawson to a new life together." The room erupted in applause. David and Chelsea stepped onto the small stage. David took the microphone, his face beaming with manufactured happiness. "Thank you, everyone," he began, his voice smooth and practiced, the voice of a confident salesman. "2 years ago, I came to Naples looking for a new start, a new sense of purpose." This was my cue. I didn't raise my voice yet. I waited until he reached the emotional crescendo. And in finding Chelsea, I found not just purpose, but true, unwavering love. She saved me. She helped me put the past behind me and become the man I was always meant to be. Chelsea, to our future. He lifted his champagne flute. The room was silent, waiting for the toast. "To your future, Mike," I called out, my voice cutting through the silence, sharp and clear. I took 2 deliberate steps forward, ensuring I was visible to everyone. Or should I say David, the man who was supposed to be dead? The sound of shattering glass, a waiter dropping a tray of flutes, was the only immediate response. Every single head in the room swiveled toward me. David's glass stopped halfway to his lips. His face, which had been beaming moments before, went instantly sickly pale. His eyes, fixed on mine, were no longer the confident eyes of Mike Dawson. They were the terrified, cornered eyes of David, the man who abandoned his life and his family to save his skin. Chelsea looked from David to me, her beautiful face etched with confusion. Who are you, and what are you talking about?" "Who am I?" I repeated, my voice rising just enough to carry over the confused murmurs. "I am Eleanor Vance. I am the wife he abandoned. I am the woman he forced to mourn his fake suicide 2 years ago. I am the widow whose life he ruined to escape millions in debt." David dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a loud, grating feedback screech. Eleanor, what are you doing here? Get out! This is insane!" "Insane?" I challenged, pulling the silver locket from my bag and holding it up for everyone to see. I have the death certificate, Mark. I planned your funeral. I raised your 2 sons, Ethan and Chloe, alone, while you were here, getting a tan and selling gym memberships as Mike Dawson. Does she know, Mike? Does your beautiful, rich fiancé know that she's marrying a dead man? A man who is a federal fugitive for identity and financial fraud? Chelsea started trembling. Mike, is this true? Who are this woman and those children? David tried to regain control, his salesmanship failing him for the first time. She's crazy. She's an ex-employee who I fired. She's clearly unhinged, trying to extort money. He turned to the crowd. Security, get this woman out of here. Before security could move, I played my trump card. I pulled up the screenshots on my phone and walked directly toward Chelsea. Before security throws out the crazy ex-employee, let me show you one thing, Chelsea. This is a screenshot of the Swiss bank account transfer that your fiancé, David Vance, made 3 weeks before he faked his death. $3 million transferred to an offshore account under the name Phoenix Trust. He didn't die broke, Chelsea. He just wanted to get rid of his family and creditors and secure his millions for his new life. I shoved the phone into Chelsea's hands. She looked at the screen, her eyes widening as she read the figure. The realization hit her with sickening clarity. David lunged for the phone, but I was faster. I stepped back, letting Chelsea absorb the truth. I have the forged birth certificate and the suicide note draft, David, I hissed, leaning close to him, my voice low and lethal. You have 2 choices, right here, right now. You either admit the truth, confess your fraud, and face federal charges and the debt collectors who will follow you for the rest of your life. Or you sign over the entire $3 million in the Phoenix Trust to me, your legitimate wife and the mother of your sons, and disappear forever, maintaining your death and allowing me to legally assume that money as my children's inheritance. David looked at the panicked crowd, the furious Chelsea, and the evidence on my phone. The weight of his past had finally caught up. His beautiful, debt-free new life was collapsing in a spectacular display of public shame. The ballroom was a tableau of frozen shock. The DJ had killed the music entirely, and the only sounds were the confused whispers of the guests and the ragged breathing of David. Mike! Chelsea stood motionless, clutching my phone, the evidence of David's massive financial fraud shimmering on the screen. David looked utterly cornered. His expensive white dinner jacket suddenly looked like a straitjacket. He stared at me, then at the exits, weighing the 2 terrifying options I had presented. Option A, confess to being David Vance, a man who faked his death, orchestrated a federal identity fraud, and was liable for millions in debt, guaranteeing immediate arrest and potentially a long prison sentence, followed by relentless pursuit by his old dangerous creditors. Option B, sign over the hidden $3 million, maintain the lie of Mike Dawson's existence, and disappear into the ether forever, leaving me and the children financially secure while sacrificing his current, comfortable life. Chelsea's furious voice finally broke the silence. Mike, tell me this is a lie. Tell me you don't have a wife. Tell me you didn't leave 2 little boys behind. David couldn't look her in the eye. He looked at the floor, at the rose archway, anywhere but at the wreckage he had created. His silence was the only confession Chelsea needed. With a guttural sound of betrayal, she hurled my phone across the room. It clattered to the marble floor, miraculously intact. "You are vile," Chelsea shrieked, tearing the enormous diamond engagement ring from her finger. She threw it at David. It struck him on the chest before bouncing onto the stage. "A dead man! You're a literal dead man! My God, the humiliation!" Her father rushed onto the stage, pulling his daughter into a protective embrace, while glaring daggers at David. The crowd, sensing the violent collapse of their perfect evening, began to converge, eager for the full spectacle. David finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and grudging admiration. He knew I had beaten him. I hadn't come for a petty argument. I had come with the meticulously gathered case built on his own hubris. "You always were too smart for your own good, Eleanor," he spat, his voice low and venomous. "And you always were too cowardly, David," I retorted calmly. "Now, which is it? Prison, debt, and death threats? Or the clean slate you paid $3 million for?" He sighed, the sound of a man resigning himself to defeat. "The Phoenix Trust is in Switzerland. I can't sign it over here." "That's where you're wrong," I said, pulling a folded notarized document from my bag. My lawyer and PI had anticipated this move. My lawyer drafted a power of attorney, giving me full authority to manage the assets of David Vance, to settle debts, and provide for his dependents. All you have to do is sign an addendum here, stating that Mike Dawson is indeed David Vance, and that you willingly cede control of the Phoenix Trust to the estate of David Vance for the benefit of his wife and sons. I placed the document on the stage railing and handed him a pen. "No one here knows you're real debt collectors, David. Sign this, and the body of David Vance remains unidentified and presumed dead. You walk out of here as Mike Dawson, legally disgraced, but alive and free from prison and the people who want you dead. Your choice." He hesitated for a long, agonizing moment. The silence was broken only by the sobs of Chelsea and the urgent pleas of her father for security to intervene. But security couldn't touch me. I was the legitimate wife of the man they knew as Mike finally. David snatched the pen. With a trembling hand, he signed the 2 lines I had marked, acknowledging his true identity and ceding control of the offshore funds. He scribbled his signature with a violence that suggested he wanted to pierce the paper. "It's done," he whispered, his face twisted with malice. He threw the pen onto the floor. "You get the money, Eleanor. You win the game. But don't you dare think you can ever erase what I did. I left you because I was suffocating, and I'd do it again." "I know you would," I replied, folding the document and tucking it into my bag, the $3 million transfer now legally secured. "But I didn't come here to erase anything, David. I came here to claim the price you were forced to pay for your love of freedom." I turned, giving the furious crowd a final weary look. "Ladies and gentlemen, your successful regional manager, Mike Dawson, is actually a fugitive fraudster named David Vance. His engagement is officially canceled. Good night." I walked out of the yacht club, leaving behind the chaos, the ruined engagement, and the man who was now legally and physically a ghost. I didn't look back. The next few weeks were a flurry of legal activity. My lawyer used the signed document and the irrefutable digital evidence to take control of the Phoenix Trust. The funds, exactly $3 million, were repatriated, settling the lingering debts from the construction business and securing a substantial trust for my son's education and future. I was finally financially free, not through grief, but through the spoils of war. The press had a field day. The story of the dead husband alive on TV became a national sensation. David Vance was gone. Mike Dawson vanished from Naples, stripped of his job, his fiancée, and his assets. The debt collectors, seeing the legal settlement and the finality of the Phoenix Trust funds being used to satisfy the biggest liabilities, were eventually satisfied that David Vance was financially ruined and remained effectively dead. I returned home to my boys, no longer a grieving widow, but a single mother who had fought a ghost and won the white picket fence fantasy, was gone forever, replaced by the hard-won reality of independence. However, the story wasn't quite over. David's choice had consequences that reached far beyond the financial. By maintaining his death, he relinquished his parental rights, securing the children's safety from his dangerous past. But in his final act of pettiness, he left one last cryptic message that I found hidden in an old safe deposit box, a message that revealed the true nature of his final calculated cruelty. The legal victory brought silence and stability, but not peace. The $3 million was secured, the massive debt was settled, and David Vance, the man, was legally and socially erased. My sons, Ethan and Chloe, were safe, protected from the dangerous creditors and the instability their father had created. I settled into the quiet routine of our new, smaller life, focusing on school and therapy for the boys to process the trauma of their father's re-death. I was determined to tell the boys a gentle truth, that their father had been very sick, not physically, but mentally, and had to go away forever to get help. I allowed them to grieve Mike Dawson, the man on TV, as a fantasy figure, a distant memory of a charismatic father who loved them but couldn't stay. A month after the settlement, as I was finally closing down David's old office files, I came across an envelope labeled with his distinctive, almost elegant handwriting. It was tucked inside an old, rarely used safe deposit box that the bank was about to liquidate. The envelope was addressed simply to Eleanor. My hands trembled as I opened it. I half expected another suicide note, or perhaps a threat. Instead, I found a single piece of paper and a small antique silver key. The paper contained a final message, written not with the desperate panic of the staged suicide note, but with the cold, self-justifying arrogance that defined David at his core. The note read, "Eleanor, I paid the price for my freedom, and you got your money a fair transaction. All things considered, you always wanted control, and now you have it. You've won the legal battle, but you will never win the war against my truth. You are right that my old life suffocated me, but it wasn't the debt that drove me to fake my death. It was you, Eleanor. You were my anchor, yes, but anchors drag you down. You were predictable, safe, and utterly boring. You didn't support my ambition. You judged it. The money was just a detail. The real victory is the life I have now, free from the crushing weight of having to pretend to be a husband and a father to children who reminded me daily of my own mediocrity. And speaking of children, you think you've protected them. You think you've secured their future. But you, Eleanor, the great detective, missed the biggest secret of all. The $3 million covers the past debt and the boys' college fund, sure, but it doesn't cover the truth you will eventually have to face about Chloe. You were so focused on the fake death and the Swiss accounts that you never asked the right question about the paternity test. You assumed I was the one who suspected you of cheating. I knew the moment she was born that Chloe wasn't mine. That wasn't a suspicion, Eleanor. That was a fact I confirmed years ago. I only ordered the DNA test again 6 months ago. Not to catch you, but to set the stage for my escape. I needed the legal paperwork to ensure I could cleanly drop the financial responsibility of a child that was never genetically mine. I never told you the full truth about why I knew. The key attached is for the safety deposit box at the downtown bank. Find the original document inside. It's the only thing I'll leave behind that you can't sell, but you must live with enjoy your freedom, Eleanor. I certainly am. The signature was simply D. My heart hammered against my ribs. The arrogance of the letter was infuriating, but the veiled threat about Chloe's paternity struck a deep chord of terror. I had always assumed David suspected me of infidelity, and the DNA test merely confirmed his suspicions, providing him with a legal loophole. But he claimed he knew the truth long before the test. I drove straight to the downtown bank, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I presented the antique key and my ID. The bank attendant retrieved a small, heavy metal box. Inside, I found a single official document, folded neatly. It was a letter from a specialist fertility clinic, dated 12 years ago, a year before I met David. It was addressed to David Vance. The letter contained the results of a diagnostic screening he had undergone before we met. I scanned the technical medical language until my eyes landed on the devastating conclusion. The report stated, unequivocally, that David Vance was sterile due to a severe childhood illness that had damaged his reproductive system. I stared at the paper, the full crushing weight of the truth finally hitting me. David Vance was medically incapable of fathering a child. I put the dates together. I met David exactly 9 months after the doctor's consultation. We married quickly. He had known the entire time we were together that he could not biologically father a child, but we had a son, Ethan, born 2 years into our marriage. The realization was a slow, cold burn. If David was sterile and he knew it, then Ethan, our firstborn son whom David claimed to love and protect, could not possibly be his. I rushed home and found the heavily redacted DNA test report David had left on his laptop, the one that confirmed David was the father of Ethan and not the father of Chloe. I went over the results again, comparing the technical sequences. David was sterile. The clinic report was irrefutable. The DNA test report had to be the final, biggest lie of all. I called my lawyer, my voice frantic, explaining the new evidence. He calmed me down and told me to bring the clinic documents immediately. The next day, we filed an urgent motion with the court, requesting a complete official retesting of both children's paternity. The wait was agonizing. When the official results came back from the court-appointed lab, they confirmed the dark, final truth David had mocked me with. David Vance was not the biological father of Ethan Vance. David Vance was not the biological father of Chloe Vance. The DNA test David had left on his laptop, the one that had confirmed him as Ethan's father, was a fake. David had deliberately falsified the results to ensure that when he faked his death, I would only question Chloe's paternity, leaving the truth about Ethan buried. He wanted me to believe he loved Ethan but rejected Chloe. But the actual truth was darker. Neither child was his. He had entered my life and married me, knowing he couldn't have children, and somehow convinced me and himself that he was the biological father of both. The true paternity of my 2 children, The central mystery of my life and the source of David's final calculated cruelty was now completely unknown. The official court-ordered DNA test results hit me harder than the staged suicide or the $3 million fraud. David had meticulously orchestrated my life based on a lie so fundamental it altered the very definition of my motherhood. He was not the father of either of my children. My lawyer, though shocked, immediately acted to protect the children's legal standing. Since the paternity of the children was now medically excluded from the man who had raised them, the court confirmed my sole custodial rights, solidifying my position as the only stable parent. The financial ruling against Mark remained, as he was responsible for the years he spent as the de facto father, regardless of genetics. The trauma now shifted from external threats to an internal search for truth. I was left with the chilling realization that David had not only been sterile, but had actively allowed me to believe he was the father of Ethan, our firstborn, a child conceived 2 years into our marriage. I revisited the time of Ethan's conception. David had seemed overjoyed, if a little awkward when I told him I was pregnant. I recalled our fertility journey leading up to it. Months of trying, medical consultations, and David's insistence that he handle all the paperwork for his tests. Now, I realize those tests were a charade, a performance to hide his sterility. The path to Ethan's true paternity was now clear: in vitro fertilization, IVF. I searched our old medical records, the ones David had meticulously packed away deep in a forgotten file box. I found a stack of documents from a high-end discreet fertility clinic dated exactly 9 months before Ethan's birth. The records confirm that David and I had indeed undergone IVF treatments. David had insisted on absolute secrecy, saying it was too personal to share. Even with family, I hadn't questioned it. The records showed that due to David's severe condition, the same one cited in the sterility report, the clinic had to use an anonymous sperm donor. The records detailed the donor's profile: highly intelligent, athletic, with specific physical traits matching those that Ethan had inherited. David hadn't just used IVF. He had carefully selected a donor to ensure the child would still be his in some spiritual sense, fulfilling his bizarre need to create a family despite his biological limitations. The reason David faked the first DNA test was not to hide my infidelity, but to hide his own medical secret and secure his place as Ethan's loving, capable father. With the truth of Ethan's paternity confirmed, an anonymous, generous donor, I was finally at peace regarding my son. He was mine, conceived through love and science, and free from the shadow of David's debt and duplicity. The remaining and most painful question was Chloe's paternity. Chloe was born 2 years after Ethan. The IVF record showed we attempted a second cycle, which failed. I was told I couldn't conceive again. Yet, 9 months later, I was pregnant with Chloe. David was ecstatic and told me it was a miracle baby, a spontaneous conception that defied medicine. I believed him, seeing it as a sign of fate. Now, armed with the knowledge of his sterility and the confirmed fact that Chloe was not his, the pieces of the puzzle clicked into the final, darkest configuration. David couldn't father children. I couldn't conceive naturally. Chloe's conception was a miracle, but not the kind I thought. I found one last file in the fertility clinic records, an entry for a successful implantation for the second IVF cycle, what was later marked aborted due to patient withdrawal. This made no sense. I never withdrew. Then I saw the names on the secondary file: David Vance and a different woman's initials, a woman who was listed as having undergone an embryo transfer simultaneously with our failed attempt. David, desperate for a second child after the failed second cycle with me, had found a woman, a surrogate or perhaps a secret acquaintance, and used the final viable embryo created from the same anonymous donor used for Ethan and implanted it into her. He paid the woman off to disappear and then tracked her down when she was ready to give up the child. He convinced me that my pregnancy was a miracle, and then, with his control secured, he simply purchased Chloe from the surrogate mother, presenting her as our miraculously conceived biological daughter. He orchestrated the adoption to secure her legally, forging my signature on some documents I thought were late pregnancy paperwork. The full, shocking truth was clear. Both of my children were biological half-siblings, conceived from the same anonymous donor. David was neither's father. He was a collector of children, a man who built his family through financial transaction and deception, all to hide his one great shame. The realization brought a strange calm. David's final act of cruelty, the DNA test, had backfired spectacularly, revealing the truth that set me completely free. I was free of his debt, free of his lies, and free of the shame of having married a coward. I finalized the establishment of the children's trusts. I changed my name and the children's last names back to my maiden name. David Vance became a cautionary tale in the legal history of financial fraud and paternity. The final chapter of my life began with stability, security, and a deep, unshakable bond with my sons, Ethan and Chloe. They were a family built not on a man's ego or a lie, but on a mother's fierce, protective love. The money was a help, but the truth was the ultimate inheritance. Thank you for listening to this difficult confession. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments section below.